Okay. So we are officially live on social media. We are here Wednesday. It is June 16th, and this is Refection Artist Live number 33 with special guest Eric Joseph with Gtechniq North America, who has a lot of different titles with Gtech. However, he's been in the industry on a industry level for 7 years, but he's been in detailing for over 20 years. He's owned his own business, so he's got quite the background in regards to detailing in general, business, craft, all the good stuff, along with representing quite a few different brands in our industry, which he did a great job at and is still doing. So
thank you, Justin.
We want to dig into Eric and his background of, early years, maybe being a kid or a teenager, getting into car detailing and how all that came about to get into this great world of detailing. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Eric, and thanks again for being on and taking the time out of the day to sit with us and chat for about an hour.
No problem. No problem. Thanks for having me. So, man, you want to go back? 82 baby to 82 baby.
Came out with a polisher.
Right? So, I mean, grew up on the South Shore of Long Island, about 15 minutes out of New York City. So it was an interesting place to grow up and be raised, we'll say, in the 90s, right? Because like the 80s, we were still, what were we, 8 when 90 hit? So we're old, but it is what it is. Really got into cars early. I would say probably like 12 or 13 years old. And interesting story. So it all started with mini trucks, not the K trucks that we know now from the JDM scene, but it really started with the late 80s, early 90s smaller pickups. So I was on a family vacation in Ocean City, Maryland, and a crew of mini trucks drove by just like an inch off the ground. And I'm like, what is that? And why do I love it? Right. So I'm in like a gift shop and here's Mini Trucking Magazine. And on the cover is a purple Mazda pickup. And I'm like, this thing just looks insane. Right. So I buy the magazine. I'm like 12 or 13 years old. And it's like my prized possession for a little bit, as a weirdo 12-year-old would have, right? Like, like not a skateboard or a bicycle. I'm like, I just really love this Mini Trucking Magazine. So when I got into high school, I may or may not have got kicked out of a Spanish class. And in New York, you have to, there's two different, not diplomas, but like there's two different programs, right? You get your standardized high school and you got what they call regents, right? And I never knew what the difference was, but it just, one had some sort of standard to it, I guess, right? So in order to keep your regents diploma, you either needed to really focus on a language, or you needed to be into the tech eds, because back then there was still technical and vocational in high school, which I missed terribly. We could talk about that later. And the auto shop was full, but I ended up being in the wood shop and a photography class, which is still kind of cool for car guys, right? And because they connected, I would always be sneaking into the auto shop. And an early networker, we could say I am. I was able to kind of network with the auto shop instructor so that when I bought my first Mazda pickup, which I still have to this day, I was able to lean on the auto shop to have a lot of the early work done in my, what would be considered car career. This is at 15 years old, which I thought was,
you doing it in the shop kind of scenario.
Yep.
Nice.
Right. Through different shop classes, even though I wasn't in the auto program. And again, maybe I was kicked out mid-term of a Spanish class for really not liking the teacher, but whatever, it happens. Right. So long story short, that led me to wanting to do a custom air suspension on the truck once we had a new motor put in it and a paint job and the whole 9 yards. So in 98, 2 years before we graduated high school, because we're old, I met a body shop gentleman who ended up becoming I call him my mentor, not so much in business, more in just automotive. So I started working with Dominic in early 99, and immediately he identified the fact that I am OCD as hell, that I will make something perfect like no one else would. And I really started being the detail guy. Right. So that would have been my first position where I was receiving money for detailing.
Now, did you with those early years, I mean, I'm sure you still were detail oriented and still did detail type stuff for yourself.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, like, I'm going to get flamed for this one, but if anyone knows what a Toyota Paseo is, so my aunt sold me a Toyota Paseo. And if you want to Google it out there, world, please do. It was pretty much a wannabe sporty version of the Tercel. So like, it wasn't cool. But I lowered it. I had to put it on wheels. And my
You
thing
made
was,
it cool.
well, debatable. I thought it was cool. And this was right about when Fast and Furious launched. So this was that 2001 time. Also when Gtechniq launched. Little fun plug there.
There you go. Yep.
So this Toyota Paseo of mine was silver, gunmetal Motegi wheels, and like it was clean 24/7. Like the tires were shined at the time with Black Magic. Still one of my favorite tire gels, believe it or not. Still have a bottle in the cabinet just to reminisce.
Yeah.
But
just smell it, just to be like, memories.
Like that's amazing. Oh, like I'll break it out every now and then. Honestly, I mean, it is sticky as all you know what, but I'll use it. But like every single time, like I would roll up somewhere and the wheels were always spotless and the tires were always shining, and that actually caught people's attention. So now I have the professional background of buzzing a rotary in a body shop environment, right? Doing some light sanding, so on and so forth. I would say high-end detailing back then didn't exist, right? So we were truly taking our early skills from the body shop world. I still like it was one pad the whole time, like for a year.
Yeah.
But I don't know,
that's what you knew. That's all there was. I mean,
that was it. And I remember I was doing a job on the side for one of my neighbor's sisters. It was a Toyota Camry. I have a silly memory, by the way. So like this is all just stored somewhere in my brain. And she came over and she's like, hey, if you use newspaper and vinegar, the windows will come out streak free. And I'm like, what? Right. So, I'm doing this just super in-depth interior detail just because I still to this day love interiors. And sure enough, I mixed up some vinegar and I put in a spray bottle and I grabbed some newspaper and I tried it. Right. And I think we've all done this. We've all tried a little too much stuff, but it actually kind of worked. Right. And that is one of those points in my detailing tenure that I look back on and I go, you know what? That's why some of these detailers are always trying new crazy things. Cause like 2001, 20 years ago, like I was doing the same thing. We just we had cell phones. I think we still had beepers, right?
Yeah, they were phasing out. That's when Nextel started coming on the scene.
Yep. Two ways.
Yeah.
If you were gangsta.
Yeah. Beep, beep.
And then at that point, I hung up. I will say this to the world. I as a guy who grew up in the New York hardcore scene, I sold out my passion. So my passion was cars. 9/11 happened. Like again, I was 15 minutes away. So our area was impacted heavy. I had a bunch of neighbors who were missing for a few days. And there was a big push for guys our age to take the civil service tests. So fire, I don't know if you know this, is hot. Like fire's hot.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get me to be a fireman. And I grew up a little anti-systematic, going back to getting kicked out of Spanish, street racing, graffiti, and New York hardcore music. So I was least likely to be a cop ever. But I was like, wait a minute, I can retire in 20 years. So like, wait, like for half pay? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't really like college. I really like being in the shop, but I'm looking around the shop going, the slightly older guys here, like they're in pretty bad shape and they're driving kind of older cars. And like, I don't really know when they can stop doing this, because they really don't have a formal retirement plan. And I can just take this test and go live a cop movie for a little bit. And if I like it, I can retire in 20 years.
See, that's a big statement too, in regards to like the fact that you kind of step back to look around you.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people don't do that. And I think a lot of people need to do that, because that is a reality check. You're right. I mean, I hate to say it, but I agree with you in regards to looking around and seeing the older guys, and they're just not going nowhere. They're driving POS vehicles or semi-POS vehicles, and that's their life. That's their day in and day out. Same spaghetti dinner, right?
And at the same time, American Shopper was gaining a lot of movement in TV before flat screens, as was what Jesse James was doing with West Coast Choppers and so on and so forth. And then I'm going to loop back in a second to that magazine. That auto industry was kind of booming. And I'm like, I'm not Jesse James. Like, this dude's got a TV show, right? Like, we're not going to be on TV doing this. So I did. I went, I sold out for the security, outside of, obviously being shot at, because that's not really secure. But, I sold out for the security of the fact that, like, every 2 weeks I was getting a nice paycheck. And I knew that as long as I didn't do what I did in Spanish class, I would be able to retire in 20 years. So that took me until 06. So 2006, I knew I was going to use the NYPD as a way to kind of get out and explore more of at least New York State, if not the rest of the country. Because once you're NYPD, you can transfer almost anywhere, just, logistics on what you lose and don't lose. But I wanted to stay close to my family. So I looked for a city that I could fly to and drive to. And I found little old Rochester, New York, about a 7.5 hour drive from where we grew up. New York's that big. For those of you who have never drove it, I mean, it's large. And I transferred up there. And that's where I was able to, because Long Island's not inexpensive. New York City is very expensive. Rochester, very fair market. So, I was able to rent a shop for like $600, which we actually visited last month. It's still there. It's still as bad as it was when I had it. Nothing's changed other than it's still really bad. But $600. I mean, why not have that? I mean, and it was the perfect little side gig. We started it on for profit. We were training some inner city kids through some Department of Justice stuff to help them get some job skills. So again, back to that lack of vocational training in high schools. I think that's a huge detriment to society right now. I'm glad it's slightly coming back, but we didn't have it. So we made it, and it was kind of cool. And that actually got me to be able to go around and train with, at the time, Smart Detail University from Chemical Guys, and Esoteric Elite with Todd Cooprider from Ohio. So that's where I got my training bug. Right. So that would have been 2011. So 10 years ago now.
So you got early training from Todd.
Early. So like the Rupes trigger was still orange. Rupes US was not a thing. It was I still have it. It's on my shelf in my home office. It was the original Mark 115. When we had to do that washer mod thing and all the other stuff we made up along the way. That still haunts that company to this day, and we're sorry. Like Dylan, Jeremy, Jason, Todd, all of them, we're sorry. We're sorry we put a washer in your machine.
Yeah, well, they're still buying the machines though, right?
They're still to this day.
They may void the warranty in some way, shape, or form, and I'm not saying that's what happens, but if it does, well, hey, you're still buying a machine, you're still paying for the repair.
There you go.
Still a good machine.
So, going out to, I'll call it early but formal trainings, I was already training police officers under like 12 or 13 certifications. And wow. I really enjoyed it. But sell out New York hardcore kid, being the cop, which was cool because I was the guy who, if I, happened to stumble into a graffiti artist, we became friends. He didn't really go to jail. And
I like your work. You get a pass today, but
well,
I got a wall behind my house.
well, no, that first shop, I mean, it was painted up, and
nice.
well, and it was never like, there's no bribes, like don't indict me. But we networked with them. I mean, that's what it's all about, and ended up securing them a lot of money to start an early street art project in the city. So like,
Very cool.
to really do those 40, 50, 60 foot tall murals, which was cool. So the early shop, again, it was kind of split, right? It was part-time, and we had the non-for-profit, and that was a lot of my time. But when I really dove into the industry was when I was, again, a decade ago, when I was training with Todd and with Paul from Chemical Guys. And I'm like, wow, there's like a whole nother world with this stuff. And it's so new, it's so young, and like there's so much room to grow. And that's where the bug came from, for sure. I love doing the work. I realized I loved building the shop out. I loved building the processes, so on and so forth. Connecting and, again, networking, right, with all the companies early on that were involved. And that would have lasted until 2014. So I did the shop thing, 3 years on the side, a couple of employees. It was by the end, it was a full-time operation, but I mean, it was part-time for me.
Nice.
I mean, this is early in coatings. This is early in paint correction. We were
more Common Core.
Yeah.
Detailing.
Yeah. I mean, we were borrowing everything from car wash or from body shop. Right.
Yeah.
But Rupes came in, and, we found Buff and Shine, and Buff and Shine started making some cool stuff. And, we started, taking a body shop compound and a Buff and Shine pad and a Rupes machine or a porter cable or a cyclo, or a flex, whatever we could find at the time. Right. Because each market was very different to who was selling what. And I mean, not gluing it together, but like, that's for you younger detailers out there. Like when you read an old forum post, it's like, oh, this is my 65-hour detail. Like we may have been guessing for 20 hours. Like I'm never going to forget our first Lamborghini we did. And I went into the shop at like 2 a.m. when I got off of work, and there was more pads and compounds and polishes on the floor than there was floor, because the guy I had working with me literally went down the rabbit hole of testing for 4 hours.
Oh my
so like,
God.
like literally it's like, oh, hey, I tried this polish on these 17 pads. I didn't like it. So then I got this polish and these 5 pads I didn't like it was just crazy. It was crazy. But, we had no standardized systems, right? The yellow cap, yellow pad didn't exist yet, right? And we were importing a ton of stuff. And that's actually back when I found Gtechniq, 22 PLE, Shoals, all, a lot of these companies are still around that still don't have a big splash in the US. But, I mean, we were, I would walk in like to my front door and there'd be a DHL box with like custom clearances. And I'm like, how did I get this? Right. But that was the game back then,
Yeah. That's what made you different too, as a shop versus the guy down the street that may, be the competitor that's just using the basic stuff.
Yep. And it worked, man. I mean, we were getting cars transported to us from 5, 6, 7 states away, which, again, looking back on it, I'm like, that was super cool, but that made no sense.
Yeah.
Like, it was a nice ego boost, but it was like 65 hours on one car. And then it took 15 hours to get here and 15 hours to go back. It's like, when we looked at it for the whopping $1,000 we billed, I'm like, whoa.
And there's no retention behind that. How are they going to get back to you for anything maintenance?
That's it. And then like they go back to their town and they're like, yo, look how good this detail shop in Rochester, New York did. And the guy's like, well, I want to go there. And he's like, I don't have a trailer. So those early days, and it's only been 10 years, but 10 years goes by fast. And it is, when you look at it on one hand, it's a long way. You know, we were really exploratory back then. And, you know, it was a little bit of a double-sided sword. I don't know, you know, I see it still in a lot of the up and coming, you know, all-stars of the industry. And I'm like, hey, like, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You know, like, it sounds really cool. It looks really cool. But why don't you focus on putting some more money in your bank account and not on that? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me loop back, right, to that magazine. So I'm on eBay, and this is probably about the same time. And sure enough, there's that magazine in mint condition, man. And I'm like, boom, buy it now. I gotta have it. So I get it, and I get to the house. It really is in mint condition, by the way. I still have it. So I gently open it and start reading through it without like putting a crease in it. And the cover truck that started it all was built by West Coast Customs and was personally owned by Ryan. Right. And there's a second part to this story, a third part, however many parts, right? I'm me. I warned you I'll talk if you give me a microphone. So I email them, right? Because now we have technology. Now we have the internet, right? Facebook is picking up.
Not hard to find somebody to get a hold of them.
No, Facebook is picking up, right? There's a couple of Facebook groups, but again, this is 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have it on our phones, right? There was no Instagram, YouTube wasn't a thing. It was common to see a phone connected to a wall still with a wire.
Yeah.
Right. True story.
Yeah.
So I send them an email, and I mean, this is probably at the start of the height of West Coast Customs, but like, I kind of expected a response, which clearly I didn't get. Right. And like, I wrote them like 3 paragraphs. And, to me, it meant a ton because, it like started that passion, right? Like that truck opened the door to me as a car enthusiast. And I told him that, or at least the email address that. So like, I figured like, he's not that big yet. And but like, maybe I'll get something. Like, there was no ask. I was like, hey man, send me a hat. No, it was just like, yo, here's a dope story. Like, run with it.
Yeah.
So fast forward now to SEMA 18, and we're going to a business dinner, and who's in front of us waiting for a table? Ryan. And 15 years as a police officer, and working with mayors and a couple of presidents and so on and so forth, you don't ever like walk up to someone and be like, hey man, I really like what you're doing, and shake their hand, right? You kind of have that uniform there kind of deal. So I've never been one to like break out of that. So I'm standing there and I'm like,
fuck it.
Well, it's his fault, right? It's his fault. It just didn't feel right though. And I was bitter because he didn't email me back. Right? So the story there, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, is if anyone ever sends you an email that like is a little bit more than a solicitation, just email them back, because you never know. You never know. Yeah.
Even a thank you.
Like, hey, dude, great story. Go F yourself. Love, Ryan. Would have been sick. And, and like, I don't know, like, did I let my ego get in the way? A little bit. Right. But like, all like that's all we had to do. Right. Again, back to the power of networking. Right. But yeah, back to your original question, man. 97, that silly Mazda. For those of you who are inquisitive, it's currently in, I rent a small workshop for the 4 hours a month I have to do that. And the Mazda's still there in 6 million pieces. I trailered it down from a property in New York 4 months ago. It has traveled 3,000 miles in the last 20 years, not under its own power and with no wheels on it.
Oh my gosh.
So, the challenge you guys need and girls need to give me is finish your stupid truck, Eric, please. Like, stop doing all this other random stuff and just finish your truck.
Yeah, you're getting older now, so you gotta.
I mean, like we said, we pull off the age a little bit, but like, it's one thing to see a truck sitting on the ground at dinner and an 18-year-old pops out of it. It's another thing to see a truck sitting on the ground at dinner and a almost 40-year-old pops out of it. But
don't mind him, honey. He's just working on the truck. Well, hasn't he been working on that? Yeah, for 20 plus years.
Yep. And it's funny too, man, because like back when I used to read mini trucking, because like you had to read a magazine to get information, all these stories were like, started when he was 17 and 9 years later he got back to it and now it's finished. And I'm like, what an idiot. It took you 9 years. And now I'm sitting here on 2 decades. And I'm like, oh, I get it. So like,
yeah, life happens.
A couple of moves, both in life and physically, and a couple of moves with companies. We'll talk about that in a second. And yeah, man, 20 years flies by. So
yeah, dig into what, as you got into the, into detailing and running with that, where you ended up with, having these opportunities with brands to work with and for as more of a business development kind of title.
Sure. And I will throw some advice in there as well, and no one's going to like it, but you're going to listen. So 2013, I'm playing with all these products, right? And I'm like, okay, ceramic this, ceramic that, early days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting in my office drinking my coffee. Julio, pour over for you, buddy. And I'm reading some Facebook groups and I'm doing some kick-ass work, man. Again, 5-6 states away, things getting trailered in, some pretty famous people's cars. And like, here's these detailers that are like, oh, well, so-and-so product company sent me this to sample. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I'm paying a lot of money to get all this stuff from overseas. And, I'm sourcing all this stuff local. I linked up with one of my local distributors that we still do a lot of business with, who I adore. And I'm finding these professional grade products. I'm like, where's my stuff to try? Like, and like, I don't know, I didn't feel bad about it, but I'm like, am I not good enough? I kind of second guessed it. And then I became me, and I'm like, you know what? You don't ask, you just wait for it to happen. And I catch a post a couple of months later about this company out of Massachusetts who is starting to develop some newer products. So it ended up being car products, which well. They were a traditional car wash manufacturer for car wash products. And they broke into detailing products, very traditional though, right? So the likes of your Malco, your Presta, your Auto Magic 5 years ago, right? Like before, all those,
legacy brands.
Yeah. The red hot cinnamon degreaser was named after the uncle, and, so on and so forth. Right. So I linked up with him. I just, I called up the guy who was kind of, running the show, and I'm like, hey man, like, I got this pretty cool operation, and like, I'm interested, I'm interested in learning some of this product development game, and I'm interested. And he was very, he was forward thinking for a traditional, product company to want to try to combat some of the imported boutiques. And I'm like, well, that's pretty badass. Like, that's kind of cool. So I said, send me some stuff. I'll pay for it. Right. And he's like, oh, no, you don't got to pay for it. I'm like, I kind of want to pay for it. I'm used to paying for it. I don't want it to be unbiased. I don't want to be biased. I want to be unbiased.
Yeah.
I want to pay for it.
No handouts.
And got some stuff. And I was like, okay, like, fair priced, super easy to use. And like, it kind of kicks ass. Right. At the time, I noticed the void in the market. Right. You probably remember some of the 2015 IDA stuff we were helping with, where I would really talk about coding anxiety, right? Because we were trained to be scared of coatings.
Yeah.
So we came to market with a bulletproof line. And I was like, listen, like, worry about the money. Don't worry about the installing it. Like, just put this stuff on and get paid.
Yep.
That I think that was a very early thought process to have, but the brand did very, very well. I really cut my teeth at SEMA of 2014. I paid my own way. That's my advice I want to give people that want to try to work with a brand and want to try to work with a company. Put some skin in the game. Turn off any little bit of entitlement you may have. Take your ego. That's cool, right? We want confidence. Brands want confidence. You can keep your ego a little bit within check, but do the work. So I showed up to SEMA 14 on a Sunday, just literally like ecstatic to be at SEMA, because like, it's not easy to get into unless you have someone who teaches you the way. And I remember I stayed at Circus in the nicer tower. It still wasn't that nice, but I was paying my own way. I wasn't getting paid. I paid for the plane ticket. I paid for the cab. There was no Uber at the time. I paid for the room. I bought my brand new shoes. I broke them in, and I just walked, man. I walked all day Sunday, all day Monday, set up the booth, started the show on Tuesday. Before I knew it, Tuesday afternoon came. I could barely stand. But it was amazing. You've done it. Think back to that first SEMA booth you were in, and I just wanted to do it better and better and better and better. So as business happens, Car Products was sold to a much larger company. And I think for those of you in the industry, you realize, or you don't realize yet, but you will realize that is very common. And with that size of transaction, things change.
Mm-hmm.
Things change, right? So I was running my third shop at the time, still a cop, by the way. So still a cop, third shop, no nonprofit. This shop, I could say, was a lot of people's dream shops. This was 15 now. Went to XPEL school, thought I was going to be a big bad PPF installer on the side.
That's a whole learning curve in itself.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I took away from it the business of paint protection film, which I think was super powerful. It was a really good move for me 6 years ago. I didn't listen to Alex, who's still the instructor. Like, shout out to him, guy's killer instructor. He said, if you're going to do this, you go back and you do it. Do not wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months. I waited like 4 months because, like, hey, busy, right? Growing a brand, being a cop full time.
Yeah, I could revisit this. No big deal. I went through the training.
I got this.
Yeah.
And I tried to do like door cups, and I failed miserably. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to build a business off this, but I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, my OCD, my perfection quest is just in the way. I can't do this. So I built a beautiful, early on, I would say, moderately successful paint protection film shop, right? Not successful to what some of these shops these days are doing, but this was also 5-6 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a gap in top where we're at now versus where we were.
100%. So rock and rolled with that, transitioning out of Car Products, jumped on that shop. We were XPEL and OptiCoat, right? So, the Gtechniq guy now had an OptiCoat shop. Live with it. It's just part of the game here, right?
It was hey, listen, that brand was, one of the, first really foundations of what coatings are here in North America. It helped 100%. A lot with that.
100%.
And it was a great network for the time that it ran. And it's still it's a pretty decent network. It doesn't have the deep foundation that it once did, but there's also a lot of other options in the market now too. So it helps.
Look, man, things, we just went over like 16 years of my life, and things change.
Bingo.
Things change,
Yep.
So we, again, I'm always going to go back to networking. So in those years, right, in those growth, those exploratory years, was always networking. We had Shout out to Barry Thiel for this one. He was instrumental with it. We would have these Northeast detailer meets, right? And I don't even, this would have been right about that 14, 15, 16. So we went out to, I think, pretty sure the one shop was Will Castro's out near Boston. We went out there once. We went to Barry's shop when he had the shop by the auction in Pennsylvania. We went up to Ivan's shop in Montreal. Super cool, 20, 25 guys and a couple of girls, believe it or not, back then, at these just grassroots throwing together events. And a lot of the other brands started attending, right? Because it was a cool sort of way to get some of these brands launched, 3D, early Ceramic Pro, what else? Modesta, right? Was shown to us at Barry's shop early on. We were still, I actually told Jason the story this morning at breakfast. We were trying to myth bust. Todd was getting a lot of hate for an early version of Sonak's Perfect Finish, that it was being nicknamed Perfect Filler, where we had to go and try to strip these fillers. And this is such early on in this detail game that we've been building.
Yeah.
We at lunch went and got oven cleaner. And finally, after barraging the surface with every solvent under the sun, we got it to dull a little bit because we used oven cleaner. And we thought we're chemists. We got this. So a lot of networking up in the Northeast, which was always cool. And threw that all together, man. Coming into 17, I'm down at Mobile Tech. And this was a big pivot point in my life. I set up the shop, the third shop, with the idea that we're going to grow a platform to introduce applied films to detailers. So the market for coatings, it wasn't what it is now, but it was growing pretty good. You were playing with Bulletproof, 12 states away?
Yeah, 2015, as soon as we got it in our hands, and we still to this day, there's just something about that product that is completely different than everything else on the market by far. And it's
100%.
Oh gosh, yeah.
100%. And I mean, I always tell people, we don't have to get into that much, but I always tell people it was 3 to 4 years too early. It was it was too early.
Oh, now you don't even hear about it. Most people don't know about it. You can barely find it. It's what's going on? It's you've got to know. And if you didn't know, then you're without.
Yep. So I put together this what I've been told was a very, very well done talk at Mobile Tech in January 17, where I talk about applied films, paint protection film, window films, and vinyl, right? And about 100, I think it was 113 detailers in the room. And again, my whole life, I've always been in my own head with these strategies, right? So the selling out my street racing graffiti artist, New York hardcore roots to be a cop, selling out my automotive enthusiast side of it to really, chase that security, not chase the dream, right? All these things. So I'm you know what, Eric? So you're going to go to Mobile Tech. You're going to give this talk, right? It's going to be good because that's what I was doing for the city as a cop. I mean, I was building PowerPoints every day, every night. Talking in front of rooms of, thousands of people, going around the country to different seminars, whether it's youth involvement, gang involvement. I became the go-to for the opioid epidemic in Western New York. Oh, wow. So if you actually know my real last name, you can Google it and see a bunch of
needless to say, you're very well seasoned in this space and you had it in the bag.
Yeah. So I'm you know what, man? If you go down to this and they love it, but no one picks up on it, you're going to finish your sellout. I had a little studio at home at this time to just keep myself up on what's going on. Had the PPF shop, but that was its own business, right? So I wasn't going there to tinker with cars, right? I'm you're just gonna let it play out, remove yourself from the industry, until you retire, and then make game plan what would be like, 75, just say, right? Go through the whole PowerPoint. It was an hour talk at Mobile-Tech. Larry Casilla comes up to me. He's like, dude, man, he's like, that was great. I'm like, sick, validated, YouTube Larry, golden, did a good job. And I would say 2 out of the 100 and change came up to me afterwards and like, hey man, I want to know more. And I followed up with them and it didn't go anywhere. And I'm like, are we too early again? So this was 4 years ago, right? Are we too early again? Are the 1.5, because you got to think, I mean, you know this better than anybody. Mobile-Tech for detailers, it's a lot of the owner operator, 1.5, 2 guy shops, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are they just not ready? Do they just not have the time, the energy, the capital? Are they just not ready? And I'm like, you know what, man? Like, if that's the case, they will be in 5 years from now, and you'll be retired collecting a pension, and you can really focus if you want to develop that. And that's the conversation I had with myself until I went to lunch and someone was like, hey man, remember that Gtechniq stuff from like 2011, 2012? Like, yeah. Well, it's going to be back in the US. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, it's a great brand. It's a great line. It's still like, seeing cars that I did forever ago, and they're not daily drivers, but, like, seeing cars from forever ago and going, this is one of the only ones. It's pretty cool, man. They're like, well, come to this dinner. Let's talk. And I'm like, well, I'm not flying home till tomorrow. So me and an old friend of mine, Antonio Patty, who, again, networking, was one of the first
Patty's Mobile
Detailing, Orlando, Florida.
Yep.
He called me way early. This is like 2011. He's like, hey man, I'm a detailer on a landline phone, right? Like connected to the wall. I'm like, oh, cool story, bro. I'm a detailer too. You called the detail shop. He's like, yo, can I come check your spot out? I'm like, okay. Right. So like, shout out to him for that, because that was like the first, like, I don't have to hide this from people. And went to dinner. About a month later, after some talks, they're like, yeah, man, like you need to be on the team. We need what you do. So that was early 17. I would say we did a very phenomenal job of exploding the brand back into the US market. And I retired early in July of 2018 and moved my entire life pretty much 11 states away in November of 18. And it has just been a absolute wild ride, blast since then.
And you went from, helping out in the business development area, which you still are, but now overseeing a lot of what the activity for Gtechniq North America.
Yep. So, I mean, I tell people, because we have our nomenclature. So for those of you that don't know, C2V3 is coding to version 3. So I tell people we're on like Gtechniq North America version like 7. So GTNA V7, right? So it is, look, as it grows, with growth comes change, period. And we are an imported boutique brand.
Yeah.
We are, we work for our mothership in the UK, right? So that makes us a little different than the other 53 regional partners for Gtechniq.
Mr. Robert Earl.
Mr. Robert Earl, we talk a lot. And the US market is a very, very, very large piece of their overall world business, because detailers in the US, we kick ass. There's a lot more of us. It's a much larger market here.
It is.
So
it is. We're driven by our cars. I mean, it's secondary to who we are. And a lot of that actually, I feel like it reflects on the person. Like when someone jumps out of the car they want, right? Not the car that they have to get because they need wheels, but the car they want sometimes reflects on that person and their personality. and it sucks because some of those personalities are a little off. So you're like, yeah, that's your car.
Like we wouldn't drive a yellow Corvette, but it's behind me.
Yeah. Wouldn't drive a Prius either, but yeah.
What about a Toyota Paseo?
Maybe early years, right? But so with Gtech, I mean, that's something, it's funny because being here on the podcast with you, I hold dearly some of these brands myself, having been with them for a while, such as, Bulletproof, and also with Gtech, it's one of those things that I've been around it so long. I've seen the return, I've seen the results, and with them being in the market of coding since 2001, I mean, that's huge compared to a lot of other brands that are out there. One, they've got the longevity. Two, they've got products that have been out since then that are still, surpassing the test of time. And and not to take away from other brands, there's a lot of great brands in our industry that are doing a damn good job. But just from personal experience, I could say that it's been one of the brands, especially on exclusivity, right? You guys have held solid to that, without watering down individual markets. And then for those that have excess installers in that market, it's also where they were comfortable with those other installers coming into their market. They all agreed on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it was tough, man, because when we took the brand over in 2017, for years it was ran under what would be considered the British umbrella, if you will, right? And that was, your territory was 750,000 people, right?
Wow.
So Alex, don't hate me for this story, but I got to bring up Alaska, right? So Alaska is big and it's vast.
Oh yeah.
And there's like all different sorts of cool animals. And unfortunately, all those shows I've been told.
Small living area, big country.
So, by the default, and this is again, growing pains, by the default of what that 4 or 5 years ago looked like, there would be one installer in all of Alaska. So when you say it that way, you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And then what we did was, which I think is different, is we dive deep into markets, right? We dive deep. So like if a shop presents themselves to us, and I challenge everyone, if you're looking to be part of the Gtechniq accredited network, just apply, right? Now, yes, if you're 4 blocks from somebody else and you're honest, you're probably not gonna be able to get on, right?
Especially if they're somebody special with the network.
Oh, 100%. But I'll use air quotes. If you're across town, and I use air quotes because what does across town really mean, right? But if you're in a market where it can be supported, we have realized through beta testing in Atlanta and Chicago, and now a little bit of Charlotte too, that the markets where you may look at our map and be like, oh, they have too many installers in Chicago. But the average shop in Chicago is doing more installs because there's more people in the market who now know and are looking at it, right? They're looking for it. And you can't get mad if a customer chooses another shop, right? Like I just changed dentists. You think the dentist I left because he was further away from me is upset that I'm going to another dentist? No. And you think that if I want to go back to that dentist because he did an amazing job on a crown, you think that if I go back to him, he's not going to take my money and let me be a customer?
Yep.
So
come on.
Yeah. So, I mean, we knock on wood, we haven't had a heated conversation with anybody of recent, and we're talking like over a year now, in regards to anything about that. But yeah, thank you for saying that. We do, we don't want to be so exclusive that you feel like it's unobtainium, but we will make you work for it.
Oh yeah. And there's a few that are still a couple of different coding networks that are still like that.
Yeah.
But it goes both ways. It's all good. They're all products. They're all tools to help us as detailers become more successful.
100%.
And I love what you guys have been doing, coming out with new stuff. You just dropped your marine line. That's doing really well. I'm sure you guys have stuff planned for SEMA, which,
Yep.
we just all, including yourself, retained your booth. So we're moving
Yeah.
forward with that.
Yeah. So it's, again, it's amazing what people talk about, right? So for those of you who haven't seen the SEMA map, we are sharing a wall with chemical guys. I trained with them 10 years ago. They're like, why would you go next to chemical guys? And I'm like, I don't know. They have a dope booth
Yeah. And
every
not only
year.
that, but let's talk logistics here of business.
Yeah.
Paul did an amazing job with the brand. He
Yep.
absolutely killed it and slayed it.
And then some. And like, not for nothing, like they kind of party.
Yeah. So
Like,
okay, let's not talk about the end product. So what? It's for consumers. Some professionals use
yeah.
it. So what? But look what he's done as a business. If
Mhm.
half of us could do that, you know how much this industry would blow up even
Yep.
past. I mean,
Yep.
you got to give the guy credit where credit's due. He's
Well,
killing
and
it.
look, I mean, I think so. I still have my certification on the wall in my office. I mean, it's from early 2012. So 9 years ago, I went to a 5-day training. I still have the manual. What they did back then, for the professional, because, I mean, products come a long way.
Mhm.
And I mean, like if you saw this, and maybe I'll bring it to SEMA to show you, if you saw his training manual from 9 years ago, you would be like, wow, like just wow. I mean, I go to trainings throughout the world and most of them don't even have manuals. And, they put together such a professional training. Now, he already knows the story. The recommended Motel 6 in Inglewood really wasn't the best choice. They had race cars on the bedding, armed security at the elevator. And again, early, the world changes. The whole place smelled like weed.
No,
Oh,
not
yeah.
Englewood.
It was but look, man, like I said, back to going to SEMA in 14, the best advice I can give detailers who want to grow their brand, who want to grow with a brand, who want to maybe really become the owner, the operator, or you know what, maybe you follow my path and you say, you know what, I'm using this as experience. I really want to work with a brand, with a product. Do the work. Do not put your hand out.
No,
Don't
build
put
your
hand out.
resume. Don't, because if you're gonna show up, you better show up with a resume.
Show up and show out for sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's looking at it from a business perspective and a professional perspective, that's how we could speak on that as being opposite brands with showing so much respect to someone like Paul. And then the other flip side of that is people that are so focused on the craft and the end product, they're the ones that have whatever in their feelings about the brand, which doesn't make any sense because we're all in this as business owners and wanting to grow and wanting to be successful with what we do individually and organically in our own market. So there's a lot of notes that could be taken from someone like him and applied to your inner business.
Absolutely. He SEMA a couple of years ago, because I meet up with him every year, and he was like, what do you think of Walmart? And I'm like, I mean, dude, that's insane. Like you put a product in the largest box store in the world. Yeah. And you brought regular everyday eyes to the fact that there's better stuff out there. Now that never stops, right? Like, let's just look at cars. Yeah. You go from a Toyota Paseo all the way to a Bugatti. It never stops, right? No. But they sell a lot more Toyotas than they do Bugattis.
And that's a foundation for others to find their own spin-off of how they can get in front of people.
Yep. And like my thing, everyone always says, because I think you're going to kick us off in a couple of minutes, and everyone's like, dude, what's the best product? Right? What's the best product? Right? And it's always Gtechniq. But outside of that,
and Shine.
Of course. And all our other friends that we love, right?
Yes.
But the best one is the one that is the easiest for you to handle, meaning acquire.
Yep.
Meaning use, yes. Right? That makes you the most profit. Period.
Bingo.
Period. It doesn't matter what I'm using. It doesn't matter what Justin's using. It doesn't matter. Right? If, you can get it easily and it works and you enjoy it, you like it, and it makes you that larger amount of profit in that day, that is the best product.
Yeah.
You know, and we see people every day on social media, you know, it's 3 a.m. What's the best tire cleaner? You know, what's the best tire cleaner at 3 a.m? Go to sleep.
Yeah.
Go to sleep.
And my favorite's not going to be your favorite. And you can't hate because of that, and don't have different feelings towards somebody because you're not feeling what their favorite product is. That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm. Not at all. And then, like, you know, also I think you'll appreciate this, tattooed muscly man. If you want to fight, not me, I'm a gentle lamb, but if you want to fight someone, like, well, throw down. You know, don't just sit there and bark on social media, like, you know, because you see it, man. Like, you know, you're smirking right now because you see it. It's like
my wheels start turning. I was cut from a different cloth when it comes to this.
Those two are talking right now in the aisle at SEMA, like they're best friends. What happened to that post from a month ago? So, like, you know, second best piece of advice I can give you is be real. You don't have to be a tough guy. You don't have to actually fight people, but just be real. You know what I mean? And like, you know, if you're going to be one way on a platform, be that way in person. That's it.
Yeah. Be real, be you.
Yep.
Most tough guys actually don't come off like that. Mm-hmm. Real tough guys don't look for fights.
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
If anything, we avoid them.
Nope. And if you need to watch something, Vin Diesel in Knockaround Guys in the bar scene is the most humbling piece of anything you can watch if you want to be that tough guy.
Yeah, 100% agree.
I do love that scene.
Oh, why? Because some of that stuff doesn't that take place in New York?
I mean, they're very. I mean, I don't know if that's racist or geographicist, but not every mafioso type of person comes from New York.
Yes, I know. A lot of them end up retiring here in Florida.
Nope. Especially on that East Coast.
Yes. All right. Well, awesome, man. You know, I love always chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. We've known each other for years, and it's always cool to be able to reconnect, and especially with not being able to get together over the past year and a half with the whole pandemic thing. But you're always a wealth of knowledge, and your stories are always, you know, just so cool with how things, you know, have happened for you. And, you know, with representing the industry the way you do, I always end our podcast with words of advice, but, you know, like I say, the last 10 minutes, you covered that. I mean, because you gave some little golden nuggets, or I should say large golden nuggets, in regards to advice for a lot of the people who are listening. So I much appreciate it. And
anytime, man.
Thank you for being on. And I hope that in the future we are able to get into, you know, because we're at 33 right now with this podcast. Hopefully we get into the triple digits. And
where's Rogan at right now?
Who knows?
I think it was like 1,500 or something. Like I got spammed on Spotify for it.
And he gets, I mean, that's his life, right? He gets to do podcasts day in and day out, and then he gets to do it however he wants, and he can do it naked if he wanted to, and people are still watching and listening.
Yep.
So, which is cool. So,
it's a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And again, Eric Joseph with Gtechniq North America, we appreciate having you on. Refection Artist Live, number 33. Thanks everybody for watching at home or at your shop or in your mobile rig or whatever the case may be, or listening at a later date. It's much appreciated from us at Buff and Shine, and of course the guests that we have. So thanks, Eric. Have a good rest of your day, bro.
See you later.
All right, take care.